Welcome to this next episode of the Ground Control Branching Out podcast. And I'm your host, Neil Bailey. This is a fascinating episode we've got ahead of us. We were speaking to Joe Coggins, HSQE manager here at Ground Control. It was a really enjoyable chat through his role. And just as an honourable mention before we get into, I am going to have to just make note of the glorious moustache that was looking at me when we were recording this. So I just had to mention that. Anyway, without further ado, let's get going. Right, so welcome, Joe. Thanks so much for coming onto the podcast. If you would, for us, just introduce yourself. So kind of who are you and what is your job title?
Yes. Hi, Neil. I'm Joe Coggins and I'm a health and safety manager working in the grounds maintenance and winter divisions.
Okay, so me, like probably many others, possibly think we know what health and safety does and what health and safety isn't. But if we start thinking about you specifically, what do you actually do?
Well, that is a good question. Every day is different, and I find myself getting involved in lots of different topics and integrating with all the departments within ground control.
Yeah, sure.
For example, today I've been reviewing some online training modules. I've been recording training modules myself to roll out.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I've been looking at personal risk assessments. So for people who have underlying health conditions, potentially could be new and expectant mothers, just a whole range of different topics. So every day is different. I might be sat at the same desk in the same position from day to day, but yeah, the variety of work that comes across my desk is keeps it interesting.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing it with GC?
With ground control, in 5 days' time, so next Wednesday, it'll be 2 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. What do you find the most interesting about the role?
I think I've touched on it already, really. It's the variety and sort of no 2 days being the same. My favourite thing to do is to get out and about and meet people, meet the teams, meet the men and women on the ground who are, for what we do in grounds maintenance, maintaining the grounds for ground control, which is our core work within the division. So it's getting out, getting to know them, what makes them tick, finding out their perceptions on safety and what hazards they might encounter, and sort of building relationships with them so that in turn, we can improve their safety, quality, environmental behaviours on site and crack on with work in a way that's not going to put them or anyone who encounters ground control on a day-to-day basis in any danger.
Sure. And you mentioned there about grounds maintenance. So do you just focus on grounds maintenance yourself? Or are you company-wide?
So it's we've got health and safety managers in each of the divisions. Right. In grounds maintenance, it's myself and Aaron. So grounds maintenance, but we also look after winter maintenance.
Oh, okay.
Within those two divisions, there's sort of like mini divisions, I call them. So got grounds maintenance ties in with amenity arboriculture, so sort of small tree works, and pest control as well, which is another sort of arm. And then winter maintenance, we've got winter as our sort of core, and then we've also got potholes. So a large variety of different activities going on.
Yeah, sure. We've kind of been, well, I suppose I introduced it more as health and safety, but here at Ground Control, it's HSQE, so health, safety, quality and environment. Is that right? Have I got that right?
It is, yeah. Ground Control, it's HSQE. I've come across QHSE, SHEC. There's loads of different.
Okay, so depending which way around the letters you can go. It may be an unfair question, but how much of your role is, I suppose, what most of us would potentially see as almost pure health and safety, as opposed to that environment stuff coming in as well?
So I would say my main focus, my sort of specialism, my knowledge is on health and safety. To have a guess, I would say 75% of my time is health and safety. Mm-hmm. However, depending on what I'm doing. So I was out and about on Tuesday at the depot, one of our fixed locations.
Okay.
And when looking at sort of one of our facilities as a whole, you're looking at maybe the safe use of petrol and diesel, but then you're also looking at the environmental factors within that. Are they stored correctly? Are they stored near any drains, water courses, and waste? Similarly with quality as well, if we're doing documentation or we're reviewing documentation, that has the quality aspect of document control, making sure we have the right forms, the right processes and policies within ground control. So normally that's why, as a function, they're sort of grouped together as a HSQE role. But yeah, predominantly my sort of day-to-day focus on health and safety, and then anything environmental and quality related that I need assistance on, or they need, whoever I'm dealing with needs someone who actually knows what they're on about in those fields. We have an environment team and a quality team as well, who sort of focus on those two topics.
Right. Okay. And do you then get also directly involved in terms of HSQE with field teams as well?
Yeah. So field teams and directly employed staff. So anything that ground control does, whether it's field team, they're carrying out the work on our behalf. So essentially, because we are giving, the work is done on behalf of ground control, we have to make sure that they are following not only their internal policies and procedures, but ground controls as well.
Yes. Okay, interesting. What would you say are the biggest challenges that you come across?
That is a good question. And I think that was something that was asked in my interview, one of the many interviews I did on my experience day, I think. It was worded differently. It was, what do you see as the sort of top 5 hazards within grounds maintenance? So challenges, hazards, very similar. I would say banks. So working on banks or slopes is a very sort of it's very challenging. I would say that 95% of sites have slopes that we have to go in and maintain. No slopes are the same. And although we have the CDM, construction design management regulations, in place for when these new business parks and leisure facilities are built, that should take into account the safety of people maintaining that site in the future.
I hadn't even thought of that.
Often gets overlooked. So they put it in, it looks nice. You'll find that actually, we're cutting into the ground a lot more to build these developments, because flat ground is can be scarce as we're developing it. And they have to cut down. So we've got these huge slopes with buildings sunk into them. And I don't really think much thought goes in during the building stage on how they're going to be maintained. And normally they just seed it or turf it, forget about it. And then our men and women have to come in and cut it, and can be quite hazardous. If there's an unprotected sort of drop at the bottom, like a retaining wall at the end of the bank. There could be water hazards, there could be plant, equipment, machinery, roads. And then you have to look at the equipment, make sure that's suitable for it. The sort of fitness and ability of the operator operating the equipment. Everyone's different levels of balance, different levels of strength in their legs and arms. So that's a factor. And then, as you know, the weather can play a major part in that. So I would say that the banks and slopes is a huge challenge, and it's something that is so vast. However many sites we have in grounds maintenance, in the thousands. There's so many banks, and they change as well with the seasons and as sites are developed. So that's probably top of my list, I would say. And then there's loads more. I mean, I could reel them off. I probably won't go into much detail. I think, generally speaking, not just in grounds maintenance, but across the industries ground control work in, and every industry, is mental health. The mental health of the teams, the team owners, even our ground control staff. But it's been highlighted since COVID, and it is it's at the forefront of everyone's mind, but I think it's still fairly fresh. So it's putting those policies and those programs in place where we can help people and assist them. And I think ground control are doing great at that. We've got mental health first aiders, we've got a committee, we do a round table event every so often where we can just sort of spitball ideas and go through that. So mental health's up there. And another challenge is the varying differences in the contracts that we service. From retail, we've got people hazards there, we've got shop windows, things like that. And then we could go on to utilities. So a water site, a load of water. But a utility site could also be, I mention this now and you'll see them everywhere you go, is those huge tall TV radio masts that are often on the top of hills. I see them. I've been to one site, the first site I went to. I've been to a few more ground control, but everywhere I go now I see them, and they're everywhere. But there's quite a lot of hazards involved in that, and it's getting to know not only our policies and processes, but what does our client stipulate? What do we have to do? What do we need to follow? Do we need a permit? How, if we want to go in that area, what do we need to do? It's just a massive information. And then housing sector, just to name a few sort of different site locations. And luckily we've got a good team with the CAMs and the CSAs, and they have huge amounts of knowledge with that. But I think that the main challenge is, if you look at it in a broad term, it's cutting grass and cutting hedges and a few trees, but there's so much more to it that I naively didn't realize when I joined. I'm not from a background in grounds maintenance, but it's just everything varies from site to site. So many different processes that we need to follow just to keep our team safe, that that itself is a huge challenge.
So that's sparked off loads of questions in my head. With you working with and supporting not just our directly employed staff, but the field teams as well, obviously with the numbers involved, that in my head is thinking, blind, that could have I'm sure it is very busy, the potential to be really, really busy. Across the year, does the focus of your role change almost with the seasons, or does it tend to be fairly kind of even?
Yes and no. I know that sort of grounds is, we've got the cut-in season.
Sure.
Just from, March to sort of later on in the year. And then you would expect a lull, certainly in grounds maintenance. However, that's when we go out and do all our extra works for our clients.
Of course, of course.
No, I don't think it changes that much. It might tail off a bit. However, in the winter seasons, when we're not doing our sort of normal routine PPM, the extra works that come in can be challenging. And every single day I get a contract manager call me with a question, and they say, I've got an interesting one for you, and it's something that's never been brought up before. So it requires a good bit of thought to be put in so that essentially we can send our teams to go and do the work safely. It keeps it interesting in the off seasons, and then for myself and Aaron, it starts picking up in the winter side of things, where we're sending all of our teams out, keeping sites safe when the temperatures drop, and clearing snow, and gritting paths and shopping centres and things like that. So there isn't that much of a sort of drop in volume. I think it's just the changes in the type of activity.
It's that changing. And I wasn't meaning that you would have a quiet period, because I know they're very, very rare. But there's potentially that changing focus depending on that. So
absolutely, it does, and certainly throughout the year, your focus changes as well. We run sort of campaigns. So during the summer, we're looking at working outside. We've got exposure to UV rays, things like that, exhaustion, heat stroke, staying hydrated. And then similar in winter, being exposed to cold conditions, cold, wet, rainy, things like that. Ground conditions underfoot become more treacherous. This year we've had an influx of insect bites, wasp and bee stings. So depending on what's going on with the environment, we're always changing tact and trying to get and put our focus on what's happening in the here and now, whilst trying to look forward as well to see if we can be proactive. So
just to kind of rewind slightly, you cannot say a statement with the interesting word in and me not follow up. You were talking about that, like a site manager or contract manager, can't remember which you said, might contact you. I've got this interesting thing. What would be an example of one of those things that's probably not been asked before?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of these interesting, it's the scenario, it's the situation and the environment. So for example, a lot of these come in now from our Amber Alert system, which has been sort of embedded for, coming up to 2 years now. And it's really encouraging our teams and our managers to take their blinkers off and look around when they're on site, look at the whole environment, not what's just going to potentially harm them, but any other site users. So what did we have the other day? Call came in from a manager, and one of the sites that we look after, a client site, they had a big tree and it was growing out of the site boundary. On the other side of the boundary was a footpath where a lot of parents and kids walk along to and from school. And it was going over that footpath, and it was going on to another industrial estate, and it was hanging over some plant and equipment that belonged to an industrial unit. The tree had some disease in it, so potentially if we had a storm, it could come down. It could injure people using the path, but it could also come and damage that plant and equipment. I think it was aircon units or something like that on the other side of the fence. Now, that's not our customer, but we're still showing a bit of concern for them because the tree is on our client site. So we want to make sure that we're looking out for them. And it was the access, really. So if we're cutting it, potentially wherever we access it from, it could either fall on the path or fall on the bit of plant. So it's then about linking in with our other divisions. We've got Mecharb, which is big boys' toys, big bits of kit, with the sort of grab where we might go up in a mute or send someone up climbing. They've got a huge bit of kit that grabs it with an arm and cuts it and simply places it down. So it's just all these different scenarios, and it's thinking about what's available within ground control and not keeping it within our division. But if there's another division that can help and I'll have a safer way of doing it, it's about linking up. So just interesting ones like that. And it's not your normal everyday scenario where we're just cutting grass. It's just interesting.
That must keep it quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's always something new. I am constantly learning. I will admit I can't always give sort of advice because it's way above my sort of knowledge levels, but it helps me to learn. And then, if something similar comes up in the future, I can go back and I'll use that sort of past experience.
Fascinating. In relation to kind of your role and what you do, what's a kind of misconception or myth about what you do that you'd like to debunk?
So when I go and meet a team for the first time, or I go to a depot to do an audit or an inspection, and if I haven't met the team before, I just sort of do an intro and say hello to everyone. And I'll let them know that sort of common misconception is that health and safety, they like to come on site, they'll point fingers, they'll tell you how to do their job. They're going to tell on you, you're going to get in trouble. That was maybe 30, 40 years ago. Now, my only sort of objective is, one, to make sure that our teams are safe. We're not going to hurt anyone else as a result of our work activities. And that if something's not quite right, let's see what we can do to improve it. So my spiel is, hi, I'm Joe. I'm the health and safety manager for ground control. Before you sort of get any ideas, I'm not here to point fingers, tell you how to do your job. I'm here to observe, see what we've got in place, see what improvements we can make that will not only benefit you, but anyone else around us. And, try and sort of educate yourselves if you want to know a bit more about this. And in turn, I always sort of say, I'm not from a grounds maintenance background. sort of just conventional safety. I like to think I'm quite hot on, and I'll say, I'm going to learn from you, and if there's anything I don't know, I'll be honest. I'll take it away and I'll find out for you, and sort of just break the ice. I've been on sites when I used to work in the building trade, and I would get pointed at, put your boots up, put your hard hat on, don't do it like this, should be doing it like that. There's a right and a wrong way to start a conversation.
Yes.
And if you do notice someone doing something that you think is unsafe or could be done in a safer way, it's always better to approach it there and then, but approach it in the right way. So starting a conversation, two-way conversation or a discussion, instead of, bawling in, shouting, finger pointing. There's a right way to go about things. And I like to think from some of the relationships that me and Aaron have built within our division is that a lot of the teams and the managers know that we're just here to help them.
Yeah.
We're here as a support function. We want to help them. We want to make sure no one gets injured, and we'll do everything we can to help. So, the misconception is that we think we know it all. We can be rude and, just go in all guns blazing. Not the case.
Interesting. So, from what I'm hearing, much more supportive, proactive, rather than being the safety police as such, which
Absolutely.
is probably was what kind of the old school. Okay. So, Joe, one thing I like to do on each of the episodes is just ask a slightly off the wall question, something not related to the role, just to kind of add a little bit of lightness to it. So the question I'm going to ask you, seeing that you are at home, even though you've got it blurred out, so I can't be really nosy. But so my question to you is, what's the most unusual item in the room that you're in? This is Joe having a really good look round now.
That's a good question. So the room I'm in was once a garage.
Okay.
Over the past sort of 18 months, we moved into this house with my wife and dogs about 3 years ago now. Past 18 months, we've been doing up the garden, and then it sort of snowballed out of control, and we decided to convert the garage into an office. It was meant to be an office for myself. My wife set up her own business. She's into her arts and crafts.
Brilliant.
So I'm now shoehorned into a small corner of the room, and the rest of what was once meant to be my office is now the studio. So there's a lot of strange things in here. There's ironing boards, there's sewing machines. Not necessarily unusual, but you can't see it because I'm blurred out. There is, on that rear wall, it's full of different varieties of dried flowers, all in a line, all going down.
Yeah.
And some of them are flowers from our wedding bouquet.
Wow.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
So that is, I think that is the weirdest or the strangest thing.
Interesting.
Nice.
I'm
sure if I dug a bit deeper, there's probably some other weird stuff. That's...
There might be something in there that you might not be able to admit to. So, maybe keeping it fairly safe.
About that. I don't know.
Thanks so much for your time, Joe. Really good to have you on the episode.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. And hopefully everyone now knows health and safety. We're here to help. So don't be afraid to reach out. Come and give us a shout, and we'll be more than happy to help out.
Lovely. Absolutely lovely final message too. Thank you so much.
Cheers, Neil. Thank you.
And there you have it. That was Joe Coggins, Health and Safety Manager Extraordinaire. Thanks so much, Joe. That was fascinating. Please do subscribe to the podcast, share it about, let everybody know all about it. And until next time, take care.